Some choices are made without language, without certainty, only the instinct to protect what cannot survive alone. In moments like these, fear fades into something quieter and more powerful, where love outweighs escape and hesitation carries a cost too heavy to bear. What follows is not a story of strength or triumph, but a fragile decision made in the rain, waiting to be seen before it disappears forever. The rain came down in hard, slanted sheets, turning the quiet stretch of highway into a blur of steel, water, and noise. Tires hissed against wet asphalt, and the air carried the sharp scent of oil and soaked earth. In the chaos of the storm, a rusted iron cage struck the road with a violent crash, skidding and spinning before breaking apart. By the time the sound faded, the vehicle that had dropped it was already gone, swallowed by rain and distance, leaving only scattered metal and a silence that felt cruelly deliberate. From the wreckage emerged a black panther, her sleek body trembling as she tested her weight on the slick ground. Water clung to her fur, darkening it until she seemed to melt into the storm itself. She did not run. Instead, she turned back toward the twisted cage, pulling 3 tiny cubs free with careful urgency. They were impossibly small, their eyes barely open, their thin cries almost lost beneath the rain. She gathered them close, curling her body around theirs, trying to shield them as the cold seeped relentlessly into their bones. Every instinct urged her toward the trees lining the road, toward shadow and cover and safety. Yet the cubs could not follow. Their legs shook beneath them, and each breath came with a faint shudder. The storm soaked through her efforts, and the heat of her body was not enough. She lifted her head and tasted the air, the scent of danger thick with passing engines and sharp wind. Still, she stayed, knowing that movement meant loss, and stillness meant time she did not have. Headlights cut through the rain, appearing and vanishing in blinding flashes. Each passing vehicle sent waves of water and noise that made the cubs cry harder. The panther shifted her stance, planting her paws wide, her muscles tight with exhaustion and fear. She had fought before, hunted before, survived drought and hunger and injury. None of that prepared her for this narrow strip of human world where speed and indifference ruled. Slowly, with a resolve born of desperation, she stepped away from the shoulder. Her paws touched the center of the lane, cold and unforgiving beneath her pads. She lowered her head, not in threat, but in something closer to surrender. Her golden eyes scanned the road, wide and searching, reflecting headlights like distant stars. The rain streamed from her whiskers as she stood between life and death, a mother asking a question she did not know how to voice. Cars swerved past her, horns blaring, engines roaring in panic or anger. Wind tore at her fur, nearly knocking her from her footing. She did not retreat. Each time she faltered, she glanced back at the cubs, huddled together on the edge of the road, and steadied herself again. Fear pressed against her chest, heavy and constant, but love pressed harder. At last, weakened beyond pride or strength, she returned to her cubs and collapsed beside them. Her body formed a barrier against the rain, her breathing slow and labored. The cubs' cries softened to faint whimpers as she rested her head against them. The rain continued to fall without pause, washing the road clean of every trace except her quiet presence. She listened to the passing world, heart steady despite exhaustion, holding on to a fragile hope that somewhere within the rushing darkness, a gentler force might still notice her waiting before it was late. The road did not grow kinder as the minutes passed. Vehicles continued to rush by, their engines roaring like distant storms layered over the rain itself. Each one brought a blast of wind that rattled the panther's tired body and sent fresh chills through her cubs. She lifted her head whenever headlights appeared, hope rising and falling in the space a heartbeat. The cubs' cries weakened, thinning into fragile sounds that barely carried past her chest. She shifted her weight constantly, adjusting her body to block the worst of the rain. But fatigue pressed down on her muscles until standing felt like an effort she could not sustain much longer. Then the sound changed. Tires slowed instead of screamed. An engine idled rather than surged. A patrol car eased onto the shoulder, its lights washing the rain-soaked road in muted flashes of blue and red. The panther tensed instantly, her body coiling around her cubs, a low warning rumbling deep in her chest. She had learned enough of the human world to know that sudden attention often brought danger. Her ears flattened, and her eyes locked onto the shape stepping out of the vehicle. The officer did not rush. He stood still for a moment, rain soaking his uniform, hands resting calmly at his sides. He took in the scene slowly. The battered cage, the soaked cubs pressed together like fallen leaves, the mother whose strength was fading but whose will remain fierce. He did not see a threat standing in front of him. He saw a life stretched to its breaking point. The distance between them held tension, but also something quieter, something watchful. He moved carefully, one measured step at a time, speaking softly, though his words were mostly lost to the rain. His voice carried no sharpness, no command. He crouched slightly, lowering himself, making his shape smaller rather than larger. In one hand, he held a thick blanket pulled from the back seat, dry and heavy, smelling faintly of fabric and warmth. He stopped well short of her reach, respecting the invisible boundaries she guarded with every breath. The panther growled, low and rough, her teeth flashing briefly as she warned him to keep his distance. Her body trembled, not from aggression alone, but from exhaustion and cold. The officer froze where he was, his posture steady, his gaze lowered just enough to show he was not challenging her. The rain pattered against the road between them, filling the silence with a steady rhythm. Time stretched. The cubs whimpered, one of them shifting weakly against her side. The panther glanced down at them, then back at the man. Her breathing quickened, the growl fading into a strained exhale. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, she nudged one cub forward with her nose. The movement was small, uncertain, but it carried a weight far greater than any threat she could have made. It was a decision carved out of desperation and trust. The officer reacted immediately, closing the distance with gentle urgency. He wrapped the cubs together in a blanket, shielding them from rain and wind, cradling them as though they were made of glass. Their cries softened almost at once, replaced by weak, steady breaths. When he turned back, unsure how the mother would respond, she surprised him again. She followed, limping slightly, climbing into the open back of the patrol car without hesitation. She curled around her cubs, pressing her body against theirs, her eyes never leaving him. The rescue did not feel like victory. There were no cheers, no sudden relief. It felt like a fragile agreement between two beings who had met at the edge of fear and chosen something gentler instead. As the car pulled away from the highway, rain still falling behind them, the officer drove slowly, aware that trust once given had to be carried with care. Inside the quiet shelter of the officer's ranch, the storm faded into a distant memory. Warm air replaced rain, and the sharp smell of wet asphalt gave way to hay, wood, and clean water. The panther rested in a corner, her body curved protectively around her cubs, eyes half-lidded but alert. She watched every movement, tracking the officer with steady focus as he moved slowly, deliberately, never rushing. He spoke little, letting silence do the work, laying towels, filling bowls, adjusting heat. Each careful action softened the edge of fear, not through force, but through consistency and the simple absence of threat. The cubs changed first. Their shivers eased, replaced by small stretches and unsteady attempts to crawl. Their cries grew stronger, fuller, and the sound filled the space with fragile life. The mother noticed everything, lifting her head at each breath, each twitch, her ears rotating toward every noise. When the officer bottle-fed them, she remained tense at first, muscles tight beneath her dark coat. Slowly, as bellies filled and warmth settled in, she relaxed inch by inch, allowing herself to rest while never fully sleeping. Days passed with quiet routine. Feedings arrived on schedule, hands gentle and predictable. The panther began to move freely within the space, stretching, grooming, teaching her cubs with soft nudges and low sounds. She no longer watched the officer with suspicion alone, but with recognition. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the barn in amber light, she stepped closer to him. She pressed her head briefly against his shoulder, a gesture neither demanded nor trained. He froze, understanding the trust it carried, and stayed still, letting the moment exist without taking more. When the cubs were strong enough, the decision came quietly. Wildlife officials arrived without urgency, respectful of the bond that had formed. The transport crate sat open, waiting, The panther guided her cubs forward, pausing only once to look back. The officer stood nearby, hands at his sides, heart heavy but steady. He understood this was not loss, but return. The door closed gently, and later, in a protected stretch of forest, it opened again. The family disappeared into tall grass and shadow, belonging fully to the world they were born for. Months later, on a different patrol beneath open sky, the officer paused near the tree line. The air felt familiar, carrying the faint scent of rain and earth. He never saw movement clearly, only felt presence, a quiet awareness that settled around him like reassurance. Somewhere beyond sight, a mother taught her growing cubs how to survive, how to remember. The bond they shared required nothing further. Kindness had traveled its full distance and returned, not in spectacle, but in peace. He walked on, knowing that compassion, once offered, leaves a mark that time and wilderness cannot erase. In the weeks that followed the release, the ranch felt quieter, yet not empty. The officer returned to his routines, repairing fences, tending animals, carrying the memory with him rather than the weight. He found himself moving slower, listening longer, aware of small lives and hidden places. The story settled into him as a lesson shaped by patience and restraint. Helping had not changed the wild, nor softened it. It had simply honored it. And in that understanding, he carried forward a gentler way of walking through the world. He knew he might never see them again, and that was enough. Some connections are meant to pass quietly, leaving gratitude in their wake, reminding those who notice that care, once given, continues long after goodbyes have faded away.